everyone. In today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm reading 12 Rules of Life by Jordan Peterson, and I think the foreword to this book actually has a bit of great information that could be applicable to our lives as entrepreneurs and millennials and people who may be unsure about the school system and what it entails. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into it. The beginning won't make much sense, but after a couple of sentences it will. So, our friendship wasn't all doom and gloom. I have made a habit of attending my fellow professors' classes at our university, and so attended his, which were always packed, and I saw what now millions have seen online. A brilliant, often dazzling public speaker who was at his best riffing like a jazz artist. At times he resembled an ardent prairie preacher, not in evangelizing, but in his passion and in his ability to tell stories that conveyed the life stakes that go with believing or disbelieving various ideas. Then he had just as easily switched to do a breathtakingly systematic summary of a series of scientific studies. He was a master at helping students become more reflective and take themselves and their future seriously. He taught them to respect many of the greatest books ever written. He gave vivid examples from clinical practice, was appropriately self-revealing even of his own vulnerabilities, and made fascinating links between evolution, the brain, and religious stories. In a world where students are taught to see evolution and religion as simply opposed by thinkers like Richard Dawkins, Jordan showed his students how evolution, of all things, helped to explain the profound psychological appeal and wisdom of many ancient stories, from Gilgamesh to the life of the Buddha, Egyptian mythology, and the Bible. He showed, for instance, how stories about journeying voluntarily into the unknown, the hero's quest, if you will, mirror universal tasks for which the brain evolved. He respected the stories, was not reductionist, and never claimed to exhaust their wisdom. If he discussed a topic such as prejudice or its emotional relatives fear and disgust, or the differences between the sexes on average, he is able to show how these traits evolved and why they survived. Above all, he alerted his students to topics rarely discussed in university, such as the simple fact that all the ancients, from Buddha to the biblical authors, knew what every slightly worn-out adult knows, that life is suffering. If you are suffering or someone close to you is, that's sad, but alas, it's not particularly special. We don't suffer only because politicians are dim-witted or the system is corrupt, or because you and I, like almost everyone else, can legitimately describe ourselves in some way as a victim of something or someone. It is because we are born human that we are guaranteed a good dose of suffering. And chances are, if you or someone you love is not suffering now, they will be within 5 years, unless you are freakishly lucky. Rearing kids is hard. Work is hard. Aging, sickness, and death are hard. And Jordan emphasized that doing all that totally on your own, without the benefit of a loving relationship or wisdom, or the psychological insights of the greatest psychologist, only makes it harder. He wasn't scaring the students. In fact, they found this frank talk reassuring, because in the depths of their psyches, most of them knew what he said was true, even if there was never a forum to discuss it. Perhaps because the adults in their lives had become so naively overprotective that they deluded themselves into thinking that not talking about suffering would in some way magically protect their children from it. Here he would relate the myth of the hero, a cross-cultural theme explored psychoanalytically by Otto Rank, who noted, following Freud, that hero myths are similar in many cultures, a theme that was picked up by Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, and Eric Newman, among others, where Freud made great contributions in explaining neuroses by, among other things, focusing on understanding what we might call a failed hero story, such as that of Oedipus. Jordan focused on triumphant heroes. In all of these triumph stories, the hero has to go into the unknown, into an unexplored territory and deal with a new great challenge and take risks. Pause. That sounds a lot like entrepreneurship, by the way. Alright, continuing. In the process, something of himself has to die or be given up, so he can be reborn and meet the challenge. This requires courage, something rarely discussed in a psychology class or textbook. During his recent public stand for free speech and against what I call forced speech, because it involves a government forcing citizens to voice political views, these stakes were very high. He had much to lose and knew it. Nonetheless, I saw him, and Tammy for that matter, not only display such courage, but also continue to live by many of the rules in this book, some of which can be very demanding. I saw him grow from the remarkable person he was into someone even more able and assured through living by these rules. In fact, it was the process of writing this book and developing these rules that led him to take the stand that he did against forced or compelled speech. And that is why during those events he started posting some of his thoughts about life and these rules on the internet. Now, over 100 million YouTube hits later, we know they have struck a chord. Given our distaste for rules, how do we explain the extraordinary response to his lectures, which give rules? In Jordan's case, it was, of course, his charisma and a rare willingness to stand for a principle that got him a wide hearing online initially. Views of his first YouTube statements quickly numbered in the hundreds of thousands. But people have kept listening because what he is saying meets a deep and unarticulated need, and that is because alongside our wish to be free of rules, we search for structure. The hunger among many younger people for rules, or at least guidelines, is greater today for good reason. In the West, at least, millennials are living through a unique historical situation. They are, I believe, the first generation to have been so thoroughly taught two seemingly contradictory ideas about morality simultaneously at their schools, colleges, and universities by many in my own generation. This contradiction has left them at times disoriented and uncertain, without guidance, and more tragically deprived of riches they don't even know exist. The first idea or teaching is that morality is relative, at best a personal value judgment. Relative means that there's no absolute right or wrong in anything. Instead, morality and the rules associated with it are just a matter of personal opinion or happenstance, relative to or related to a particular framework, such as one's ethnicity, one's upbringing, or the culture or historical moment one is born into. It's nothing but an accident of birth. According to this argument, now a creed, history teaches that religions, tribes, nations, and ethnic groups tend to disagree about fundamental matters and always have. Today, the postmodernist left makes the additional claim that one group's morality is nothing but its attempt to exercise power over another group. So the decent thing to do, once it becomes apparent how arbitrary your and your society's moral values are, is to show tolerance for people who think differently and who come from different diverse backgrounds. That emphasis on tolerance is so paramount that for many people, one of the worst character flaws a person can have is to be judgmental. And since we don't know right from wrong or what is good, just about the most inappropriate thing an adult can do is give a young person advice about how to live. And so a generation that has been raised untutored in what was once called aptly practical wisdom, which guided previous generations. Millennials often told they have received the finest education available anywhere, have actually suffered a form of serious intellectual and moral neglect. The relativists of my generation and Jordan's, many of whom became their professors, chose to devalue thousands of years of human knowledge about how to acquire virtue, dismissing it as passé, non-relevant, or even oppressive. They were so successful at it that the very word virtue sounds out of date, and someone using it appears anachronistically moralistic and self-righteous. Some argue we're actually gonna skip this paragraph, but it says that some people argue that Freud contributed to longing for culture and some other stuff, but it's unrelated to what the message I have here for the most part for you. And that was a good portion of that message, because I believe that it sums up a lot of things that we go through in everyday life as young people very well. And it also sums up part of the reason why I feel I became entrepreneurial during my time in school, because I saw the failures around us, and frankly, I don't see how schools are non-biased and how that is furthering our culture as well. But here is some more. The study of virtue is not quite the same as the study of morals. Right and wrong, good and evil. Aristotle defined the virtues simply as ways of behaving that are most conducive to happiness in life. Vice was defined as the ways of behaving least conducive to happiness. He observed that the virtues always aim for balance and avoid the extremes of the vices. Aristotle studied the virtues and the vices in the Nicomachean Ethics. It was a book based on experience and observation, not conjecture, about the kind of happiness that was possible for human beings. Cultivating judgment about the difference between virtue and vice is the beginning of wisdom, something that can never be out of date. Alright, I would like to know your thoughts on what I just read and how it may relate to you and your everyday life and even education. I'd also like to know your thoughts on Jordan Peterson, and like I said, this book is The 12 Rules of Life by Jordan B. Peterson, and you should read it just to open your mind. I haven't finished the book, I'm going through it right now, which is why I'm making this, because that passage I thought would be apt to many people around my age. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.